A single crimson candle burns without a breeze to disturb its flame. Its light slides across black stone tables scarred by blades, acids, and rituals whose names have been forgotten by almost everyone alive. Dust hangs unmoving in the air of an abandoned chamber beneath the surface of Exegol, where silence has lasted for generations, broken only by the distant murmur of machines hidden deep within the planet. Here, every stain tells a story. Every cracked vessel once held something that should never have existed. And every shadow seems to remember hands that shaped life itself. Through the dark side of the Force, the room feels less like a laboratory than a shrine to forbidden ambition, preserved long after the masters who built it surrendered their bodies to time. This is our quiet journey into the forbidden secrets of Sith alchemy, told slowly enough to accompany the closing of tired eyes while your mind wanders through one of the darkest corners of Star Wars lore. If you have traveled these stories before, quietly remember which night you have reached. If this is your first visit, simply think of it as Night 1. There is no hurry here. We will move patiently through ancient temples, forgotten empires, hidden laboratories, and mysteries that even the Jedi preferred not to speak aloud. Long before the Death Star cast its shadow across the galaxy, long before Darth Vader first ignited his crimson lightsaber, another branch of Sith knowledge was already rewriting flesh, metal, and even death itself. Why does Sith alchemy feel so different from every other expression of the Force? That question sits quietly beneath nearly every tale involving the ancient Sith, because most Force abilities disappear the moment their user stops sustaining them. A Jedi lifts a stone, and when concentration ends, gravity resumes its work. A Sith unleashes lightning, and the energy fades almost as quickly as it appeared. Sith alchemy obeys another logic entirely. It leaves scars that remain for centuries. It reshapes creatures into monsters that continue breeding long after their creators vanish. It fills masks, swords, temples, and holocrons with echoes that survive dynasties, wars, and the deaths of entire civilizations. Among all known Force traditions preserved in canon, Sith alchemy is remarkable because its effects often outlive the Sith themselves. The modern Jedi Order knew fragments of these dangers, but the knowledge was deliberately incomplete. During the final centuries of the Galactic Republic, the Jedi archives on Coruscant contained records concerning Sith, artifacts, ancient tombs, and forbidden rituals, yet many texts had already been sealed away after earlier conflicts with the Sith. Masters understood that curiosity itself could become dangerous when directed toward objects steeped in the dark side. That caution explains why characters like Luke Skywalker, centuries later, had to reconstruct so much forgotten history after the fall of the Empire. Canon repeatedly shows that Sith knowledge survives destruction better than almost anything else. Libraries burn, republics collapse. Yet a single holocron hidden inside an ancient temple can patiently wait for thousands of years until another seeker finally arrives. The word alchemy itself carries expectations that do not quite fit the Star Wars galaxy. It was never merely chemistry, nor simply magic, nor only advanced science hidden beneath religious ritual. Sith alchemy blended every discipline the Sith considered useful, Biological experimentation stood beside meditation. Metallurgy existed alongside dark side invocations. Ancient languages were spoken over molten alloys, while living creatures endured transformations. Guided by hatred, obsession, and extraordinary patience, the Sith never separated science from belief because, to them, the Force flowed through both. If the dark side could shape thought, then it could shape flesh. If it could cloud judgment, then it could also seep into steel, crystal, and stone until ordinary objects became permanently changed. That belief stretches back to the oldest chapters of Sith history, thousands of years before the rise of Darth Sidious, before the Clone Wars, before even the High Republic. There existed the ancient Sith Empire centered upon worlds such as Korriban, known in later eras as Moraband and Ziost. These harsh planets became places where the earliest Dark Lords raised immense tombs beneath unforgiving skies. Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords, filled with pyramidal mausoleums built to preserve both memory and power. Canon presents these worlds not merely as political capitals, but as sacred landscapes where the boundary between the living and the dead grew unusually thin. Every generation of Sith inherited ruins already ancient, believing that deeper knowledge always lay buried beneath the stones left by their predecessors. Yet another mystery appears almost immediately. Did the Sith invent these terrible arts after building their empire? Or did they inherit fragments from an even older age? Canon tells us that the Sith Order emerged after exiled Dark Jedi encountered the native Sith species during the period remembered as the 100-Year Darkness. These fallen Jedi did not arrive empty-handed. They carried experience with the Force already shaped by ambition and conflict. Once they established dominion over the Sith species, new traditions formed from the blending of cultures. Exactly which rituals belonged to the native Sith and which originated with the exiles remains uncertain. That silence inside the historical record has fascinated scholars and readers alike, because every missing century leaves room for careful questions without disturbing established canon. The earliest legendary ruler associated with Sith civilization is King Addus, whose memory endured for millennia even after the Empire transformed beyond recognition. Canon remembers him as a mighty leader of the Sith species who ruled long before the later Dark Lords, familiar from the films. His great fortress stood upon Korriban, and stories surrounding his reign became inseparable from the sacred identity of the ancient Sith. Later generations looked backward toward figures like Addus with almost religious reverence, treating them as founders whose achievements justified every cruelty committed afterward. Whether every tale surrounding him is perfectly accurate hardly mattered to later Sith. Legends themselves became instruments of power, encouraging each ambitious apprentice to believe that darker secrets always waited just beyond accepted knowledge. Walk slowly through one of those ancient temples in your imagination. The air is cool, despite the desert heat outside. Stone corridors descend beneath the surface where sunlight never reaches. Massive statues of forgotten Dark Lords stand motionless beside passages carved with angular Sith runes whose meanings have faded through time. Every step echoes softly until even your breathing seems too loud for the place. These temples were never built only to honor the dead. They also protected teachings considered too dangerous for ordinary followers, storing holocrons, relics, ceremonial weapons, and chambers dedicated to rituals that required complete isolation from the outside galaxy. Centuries later, those same tombs continued attracting seekers. In the era of the Galactic Empire, Darth Sidious explored ancient Sith knowledge with extraordinary determination, collecting relics and studying traditions abandoned by most of his predecessors. Canon consistently portrays Sidious as more than a politician or military strategist. He was also a relentless student of forgotten Sith history. His fascination eventually reached Exegol, hidden within the unknown regions beyond ordinary navigation routes, where the Sith Eternal preserved ceremonies and laboratories invisible to the wider galaxy. The laboratories beneath Exegol did not appear suddenly during the sequel era. They represented the continuation of ambitions stretching back toward those earliest temples on Korriban, where the first experiments blurred the distinction between creation and corruption. So the crimson candle continues burning inside the abandoned chamber. Its flame reflects from cracked glass vessels whose contents evaporated long ago from blackened instruments resting exactly where unseen hands laid them down, and from carvings cut so deeply into the stone that even centuries of neglect have failed to erase them. The laboratory waits without impatience because forbidden knowledge has never measured time as ordinary beings do. Kingdoms rise, Jedi orders flourish and fall, empires proclaim themselves eternal before vanishing into history, yet these silent rooms remain. And as you linger beside that small crimson light, another question quietly presents itself. If the Sith believed life itself could be rewritten, what was the very first living thing they dared to change? Why did the earliest Sith become convinced that life itself could be reshaped? The answer begins long before the Republic stretched across the galaxy, in an age when the Sith were not yet the hidden masters of political conspiracies, but rulers of an empire forged upon harsh worlds beneath unfamiliar constellations. Canon tells us that the Sith Order emerged after the 100-year darkness, when defeated dark Jedi fled known space and eventually encountered the red-skinned Sith species on Korriban. Those exiles arrived carrying centuries of Jedi training, but also pride, resentment, and a willingness to cross boundaries the Jedi considered sacred. The native Sith already possessed their own traditions centered upon the dark side, their own kings, priests, and rituals woven into everyday life. Instead of one culture replacing another, the two gradually merged into something neither had been before. Out of that union came an empire whose greatest obsession was not peace, conquest alone, or even knowledge for its own sake, but mastery over every natural limit. The ancient Sith species had inhabited worlds unlike the shining core planets that later defined the Republic. Korriban was a place of dry valleys, jagged cliffs, and crimson deserts, where enormous tombs rose against empty horizons. Ziost, by contrast, was a frozen world of endless snowfields and bitter winds, becoming another heart of Sith civilization during the Empire's expansion. Canon consistently presents these planets as more than capitals. They were sacred landscapes where rulers believed the dark side flowed through the land itself. Every temple, every burial chamber, every ceremonial avenue reinforced a single lesson. The Sith did not seek harmony with nature. They expected nature to submit. Among the oldest names preserved from this era is King Adus, remembered across both canon and older legends traditions as the legendary ruler of the Sith species before the arrival of the exiled Dark Jedi. Canon acknowledges Adus as a figure of immense importance to Sith history, even if many details surrounding his reign remain uncertain. Later Sith generations treated him almost as the first great symbol of strength, whether or not every tale attached to his name reflected literal history. This reverence reveals something essential about Sith culture. The past was never merely studied. It was weaponized. Every apprentice was encouraged to believe that forgotten ancestors possessed greater secrets than living masters, ensuring that each generation dug deeper into forbidden knowledge than the one before it. That attitude shaped the architecture surrounding them. A Jedi temple welcomed light through broad windows and open courtyards, encouraging contemplation beneath the sky of Coruscant. Sith temples turned inward instead. Their chambers descended beneath mountains, beneath deserts, beneath layers of stone that separated sacred rituals from ordinary life. The deeper one traveled into these complexes, the fewer decorative elements remained. Walls became smooth and severe. Hallways narrowed. Light diminished until only braziers or crimson crystals illuminated ritual chambers, where silence itself felt deliberate. Even before ceremony began, the building taught its visitors that power belonged to those willing to descend into darkness without hesitation. Why were these hidden chambers always isolated so carefully? Canon never offers a direct answer, yet the surviving evidence points in one direction. Sith rituals often demanded complete concentration, prolonged meditation, and energies dangerous enough to threaten everyone nearby. Ancient holocrons recovered from Sith sites consistently appear sealed behind elaborate trials or protective barriers. Tomb guardians, mechanical defenses, and force-based locks prevented casual intrusion. The architecture itself became part of the ritual, ensuring that only initiates who demonstrated sufficient knowledge could approach the deepest sanctuaries. A Sith laboratory was never simply a workplace. It functioned as both fortress and cathedral. As the Empire matured, the title of Dark Lord of the Sith carried responsibilities extending beyond military conquest. Sith rulers surrounded themselves with scholars, priests, engineers, and sorcerers, whose work blended disciplines modern civilizations usually separate. Metals were refined while ancient incantations echoed through the same halls. Biological specimens rested beside ceremonial relics. Crystal formations were examined not only for physical properties but also for their relationship to the Force. To a Sith philosopher, there was no contradiction in studying anatomy during the morning and conducting spiritual rituals before nightfall. Every field of knowledge became another instrument for domination. This approach sharply separated the Sith from the Jedi Order. Jedi education centered upon discipline, restraint, compassion, and accepting that some mysteries deserved respect rather than control. Even during the Republic's golden centuries, Jedi healers employed remarkable Force abilities to ease suffering, but they did not seek to redesign entire species or permanently alter living bodies according to personal ambition. The distinction appears repeatedly across canon. The Jedi worked alongside life. The Sith sought ownership of it. That philosophical divide eventually became just as significant as any lightsaber duel fought between the two orders. The Force itself offered both traditions extraordinary possibilities, yet each interpreted those possibilities differently. A Jedi Master might stand within a forest and sense countless living beings, connected through an invisible current flowing between plants, animals, and people alike. A Sith entering that same forest would perceive resources waiting to be bent toward a stronger will. Neither vision changed the Force. It changed the one observing it. Sith alchemy emerged naturally from this worldview because once every living thing became material to reshape, experimentation ceased to feel immoral. It became proof of superiority. Generations passed, and these ideas spread from master to apprentice. Sith instruction rarely resembled the orderly classrooms familiar to younglings inside the Jedi Temple. Knowledge was earned through rivalry, secrecy, and survival. Masters withheld discoveries until students demonstrated sufficient ruthlessness. Apprentices stole techniques from rivals whenever opportunity appeared. Valuable rituals circulated slowly because possessing unique knowledge increased one's chances of eventually overthrowing a teacher. This constant competition produced remarkable innovation, but it also ensured that countless experiments vanished whenever a master died unexpectedly, taking irreplaceable secrets into the grave. That pattern explains one of the greatest frustrations confronting historians inside the Star Wars universe. Canon preserves names of powerful Sith, such as Marka Ragnos, through references and surviving traditions, while countless lesser alchemists disappear entirely, despite shaping the development of Sith science. Their creations endured longer than their identities. A mutated predator roaming forgotten wilderness, an enchanted blade resting inside a sealed crypt, or a corrupted shrine hidden beneath collapsing stone could outlast the person responsible by thousands of years. The Sith chased immortality with relentless determination, yet irony followed them constantly. Their experiments often survived more completely than their own names. Why then did the Jedi continue searching ancient Sith worlds despite recognizing the danger? Because ignorance carried dangers of its own. Throughout galactic history, Jedi expeditions returned repeatedly to places such as Moraband, seeking lost relics before another servant of the dark side could claim them. The Clone Wars animated series shows Yoda journeying to Moraband itself, where the ancient world still radiates dark side power despite the passing of ages. Tombs remained active, visions lingered. The landscape seemed to remember every ritual performed there. Destruction alone had never erased the influence of Sith alchemy. Time itself had failed. Back inside the silent laboratory beneath Exegol, the crimson candle continues to burn with the same unwavering flame. Nearby rests an empty stone table large enough to hold something alive, its surface marked by channels carved to carry strange liquids toward waiting basins below. Nothing moves now except the gentle flicker of light across ancient tools. Abandoned exactly where their owners left them, the room waits with extraordinary patience, as though it already knows another generation will eventually rediscover its secrets, and somewhere beyond these walls lies the answer to the next unsettling question. What was the first creature the Sith believed they could improve by abandoning nature altogether? Why did the Sith stop experimenting on themselves and begin creating entirely new creatures? That question marks one of the darkest turns in the history of Sith alchemy, because somewhere between studying life and controlling it, the goal quietly changed. Ancient Sith no longer sought only stronger warriors or wiser rulers. They wanted obedient predators that could survive impossible environments, inspire terror before battle even began, and accomplish tasks no ordinary soldier could perform. Canon preserves only fragments of these efforts, yet those fragments reveal enough to understand the frightening scale of their ambition. The creatures left behind often survived long after the empires that bred them had vanished. Among the most infamous of these creations are the Terrantiteks. While many details surrounding their earliest origins belong to legends rather than current canon, the concept itself has become deeply associated with Sith experimentation across Star Wars lore and is best understood as part of that older continuity rather than established canon. In those stories, Terrantiteks were immense predators, corrupted through Sith alchemy until they developed an extraordinary instinct for hunting Force-sensitive beings, especially Jedi. Massive claws, thick armor-like hides, and overwhelming physical strength allowed them to challenge opponents who normally relied upon agility and the Force. Legends repeatedly places these beasts near ancient Sith strongholds, where dark side rituals had flourished for generations. Even though modern canon has not fully restored every detail, the enduring association between Sith laboratories and unnatural biological manipulation remains entirely consistent with canon's portrayal of Sith philosophy. Canon itself offers another clear pattern. Wherever the Sith establish long-term sanctuaries, life begins changing around them. Exegol is populated by strange beings, serving the Sith eternal, many appearing adapted to the planet's perpetual darkness and isolation. Massive laboratories filled with cloning equipment operate beneath temples carved into black mountains. The visual language of these locations tells its own story without lengthy explanation. Organic growth, machinery, ritual chambers, and ancient architecture exist side by side until the distinction between science and sorcery disappears. The Sith never appear interested in preserving nature exactly as they found it. This obsession becomes especially striking when viewed beside the Jedi relationship with living creatures. Throughout the films and series, Jedi frequently calm frightened animals, form partnerships with local wildlife, or avoid unnecessary violence whenever possible. Ezra Bridger communicates with Loth wolves and Purrgil. Cal Kestis forms quiet bonds with creatures encountered across the galaxy. Even Luke Skywalker approaches unfamiliar life with curiosity before aggression. The Sith pursue the opposite instinct. Where the Jedi ask how life can be understood, the Sith ask how it can become useful. Imagine entering one of those forgotten breeding chambers beneath an ancient temple. Heavy stone doors grind open after centuries of silence, revealing rows of empty enclosures carved directly into the rock. Chains remain attached to thick iron rings set deep within the walls. Feeding troughs have long since turned to dust, yet claw marks still score the stone several centimeters deep. The room feels strangely larger than its dimensions suggest because every surface reminds you that something enormous once lived here. Nothing remains except silence and the unsettling realization that whatever escaped never returned. Why would creatures born through Sith alchemy become so difficult to control? The answer lies in the very nature of the dark side itself. Canon consistently portrays the dark side as feeding upon fear, anger, hatred, and domination. But those emotions rarely remain obedient forever. Darth Sidious believed he controlled Darth Vader until compassion unexpectedly resurfaced inside his apprentice. Supreme Leader Snoke believed Kylo Ren remained entirely dependent upon manipulation until that confidence proved fatal aboard the Supremacy. Again and again, servants of the dark side discover that power gained through domination eventually resists its master. If that truth applies to intelligent apprentices, it becomes even more dangerous when the subject is a creature bred purely for violence. The Sith nevertheless accepted this risk because they valued immediate advantage over long-term stability. Ancient wars against the Jedi demanded weapons capable of unsettling opponents before lightsabers ever crossed. A monstrous predator unleashed against a frontier outpost accomplished more than physical destruction alone. It shattered confidence. Rumors spread rapidly across neighboring systems. Travelers altered established hyperspace routes to avoid certain regions. Entire valleys, forests, and ruined temples became abandoned because local populations feared whatever still prowled there after sunset. Terror itself became another military resource. Canon repeatedly shows how the Sith exploit symbolism as carefully as strategy. Darth Vader's black armor, the towering silhouette of Imperial Star Destroyers, and the immense profile of the Death Star all project psychological dominance before combat begins. Sith alchemy served a similar purpose on a smaller, older scale. A mutated guardian standing motionless outside a tomb reminded every visitor that ordinary rules no longer applied beyond that doorway. Such creatures transformed architecture into living warnings. Before an intruder ever confronted a Sith Lord, fear had already begun working on the mind. There is another subtle lesson hidden within these laboratories. The Sith rarely created beauty for its own sake. Even magnificent works of Sith craftsmanship often possess sharp angles, oppressive proportions, or unsettling asymmetry. Their engineered creatures followed the same philosophy. Strength mattered. Intimidation mattered. Endurance mattered. Grace held little value unless it improved efficiency. This difference separates Sith creation from the elegant organic forms often associated with worlds like Naboo, Alderaan, or the lush forests of Kashyyyk, where architecture and nature seem to exist in quiet conversation rather than constant conflict. Not every experiment succeeded. Canon does not catalog every failed attempt, yet the abandoned laboratories scattered across Sith worlds speak loudly enough. Empty vats stand beside shattered containers. Ritual chambers remain sealed despite the disappearance of those who built them. Entire sections of ancient complexes collapsed long before later explorers arrived. These ruins suggest countless projects ended not in triumph, but in disaster, so complete that no apprentice considered continuing the work. Failure accumulated beneath layers of stone until only the successful horrors entered Sith legend. Centuries later, explorers wandering places like Moraband or Exegol encounter only the surviving evidence. They see claws without knowing the creature's name. They discover restraints without understanding what once struggled against them. They recover fragmented holocrons, describing procedures whose final pages have vanished forever. Every incomplete record invites another question rather than providing a comfortable answer. That uncertainty is one reason Sith history remains so captivating. The galaxy remembers the monsters more clearly than it remembers the scientists who created them. The crimson candle still burns beside the ancient work table, though its flame has shortened almost imperceptibly. Across the chamber rests a ceremonial rack where blades once hung beside surgical instruments, as the weapons and tools had always belonged together. Beyond the laboratory waits another chamber, whose walls gleam faintly with veins of blackened metal, hinting that the Sith eventually turned their attention away from living flesh and towards something equally enduring. If life itself could be transformed through the dark side, what might happen when that same corruption was forged into steel meant to survive for thousands of years? Why did the Sith believe an ordinary weapon was never enough? Somewhere in the earliest centuries of their empire, the answer shifted from craftsmanship to corruption. A sharpened blade could kill. A lightsaber could cut through armor. But a weapon touched by the dark side carried something invisible long after its edge dulled. Sith alchemy transformed objects into vessels that remembered hatred, preserved intention, and sometimes reached forward through centuries to influence whoever dared to claim them. The Sith did not simply forge tools for war. They sought companions that continued serving them even after death. Long before lightsabers became the defining weapon of Force users, the Sith wielded swords, fashioned from rare metals and strengthened through alchemical rituals. This belongs primarily to Legends continuity, where Sith swords occupy an important place in ancient history, but the concept aligns naturally with canon's repeated portrayal of enchanted Sith artifacts. These weapons were not valued because they could rival a lightsaber through ordinary metallurgy alone. Rituals surrounding their creation mattered just as much as the forging itself. Masters invested immense time imbuing blades with dark side energy until they became extensions of their own will. The weapon ceased being merely carried by its owner. In a sense, the owner also belonged to the weapon. Canon reinforces this idea through surviving relics rather than surviving swords. Across films, novels, comics, and television series, Sith artifacts consistently retain powerful dark side presence long after their creators disappear. Ancient holocrons remain active for millennia. Temples continue radiating corruption, despite lying abandoned. Masks preserved inside forgotten shrines still influence those who approach them. Unlike ordinary technology, these objects are never truly inert. Their significance comes from the Force itself lingering within them, preserving echoes of emotion, memory, and purpose beyond physical death. One of the clearest examples is the mask of Darth Momin. Introduced in the canon comic series featuring Darth Vader, Momin lived during an earlier Sith era as an artist whose creations reflected complete devotion to the dark side. His final masterpiece was neither sculpture nor architecture alone. Through forbidden knowledge, his consciousness became bound to his ceremonial mask after his physical death. Centuries later, Darth Sidious recovered that relic and eventually entrusted it to Vader during construction work on Mustafar. The mask did not simply preserve history. Momin himself remained capable of thought, conversation, manipulation, and eventually temporary resurrection through another body. Sith alchemy had crossed an extraordinary threshold where an object no longer represented its creator, but actively continued the creator's existence. Imagine lifting such a relic from an ancient stone pedestal. At first, it feels surprisingly ordinary beneath your hands, its surface cold, after centuries inside a sealed chamber. Dust slips away as your fingers reveal intricate carvings almost untouched by time. Yet the surrounding silence changes. The air feels heavier. Thoughts become strangely focused upon the object itself, as though your attention no longer belongs entirely to you. Canon repeatedly describes encounters with dark side artifacts in similar emotional terms, emphasizing not physical danger first, but subtle influence creeping quietly into the mind. Darth Vader's relationship with Momin demonstrates how cautiously even powerful Sith approached these relics. Vader did not treat the mask as an ordinary archaeological discovery. He recognized immediately that it contained genuine power worthy of study. Sidious. Despite surpassing nearly every living Sith in knowledge, likewise handled ancient artifacts with respect bordering upon suspicion. This detail matters because it reveals something about Sith culture often overlooked. They coveted the achievements of earlier Dark Lords, but they never assumed those achievements were safely under control. Every relic represented opportunity accompanied by real risk. The Sith holocron follows the same principle. Canon portrays these pyramidal devices as repositories of knowledge accessible primarily through the dark side. Unlike conventional data storage, a Sith holocron does not merely display information. It evaluates, questions, instructs, and occasionally manipulates its user. The holocron encountered by Ezra Bridger during the events of Star Wars Rebels becomes dangerous precisely because knowledge cannot be separated from the intentions embedded within it. Every lesson carries philosophical weight. Every answer quietly encourages another question. Curiosity becomes the doorway through which corruption enters. This explains why the Jedi devoted so much effort to recovering and sealing Sith artifacts instead of destroying them whenever possible. Destruction was not always straightforward. The dark side frequently lingered at locations where relics had rested for generations. Temples continued generating disturbing visions even after valuable objects disappeared. On worlds deeply connected to the Sith, architecture itself seemed permanently altered. A chamber dedicated to centuries of ritual could retain an oppressive atmosphere without any visible source. The Force had soaked into stone just as surely as smoke settles into ancient wood. Mustafar offers another striking example of this relationship between place and object. Canon establishes the volcanic world as a location of extraordinary dark side significance long before Darth Vader made it his home. After the events of Revenge of the Sith, Vader constructed his fortress there under Darth Sidious' guidance. The castle's design deliberately incorporated ancient Sith architecture while channeling the planet's unique dark side energies. Vader's meditation chamber, the fortress foundations, and the nearby cave all formed part of a landscape already considered spiritually charged. The Sith did not believe powerful objects should exist independently from powerful places. Each strengthened the other. Why did Sith artifacts remain dangerous even to those who understood their origins? Because the dark side rarely behaves like ordinary knowledge. Learning how to operate a hyperdrive does not gradually reshape the engineer's character. Studying starship navigation does not demand emotional surrender. Sith teachings function differently. Every lesson encourages greater confidence, greater control, greater willingness to dismiss restraint as weakness. The artifact itself becomes a patient teacher whose curriculum never changes, regardless of which century its student happens to inhabit. That patience explains why relics from forgotten empires continue appearing throughout galactic history. Thousands of years separate the earliest Sith rulers from Darth Sidious, yet their influence reaches him through preserved temples, recovered holocrons, surviving manuscripts, and artifacts hidden across the unknown regions. The Sith understood something remarkably practical. Flesh decays, empires fracture, apprentices betray their masters, but a carefully hidden object can wait forever. It asks for no food, no army, no political alliance. Time itself eventually becomes its greatest ally. The crimson candle now throws its light across an empty weapon rack where ceremonial blades once rested beside ancient masks and dark pyramidal holocrons. Their owners have turned to dust, yet the shelves remain prepared for their return, as though the chamber never accepted that those masters were truly gone. Beyond another doorway lies a circular room whose walls are covered not with weapons but with carved faces staring outward from the stone. In the silence, an unsettling thought begins to take shape. If the Sith could preserve power inside lifeless objects, how long would it be before they attempted to preserve the living mind itself? Why did so many Sith become convinced that death itself was only another obstacle waiting to be mastered? Every generation of the Sith inherited stories of powerful Dark Lords who conquered planets, defeated rivals, and uncovered forgotten secrets. Yet each of those victories ended in the same place. Their bodies failed, their empires collapsed, their apprentices betrayed them. No amount of military triumph altered the simple truth that mortality eventually claimed every ruler. Sith alchemy therefore turned toward its most ambitious goal, not the creation of stronger weapons or stranger creatures, but the preservation of consciousness beyond physical death. The Sith understood that memory alone was insufficient. A statue could honor a Dark Lord, and a tomb could preserve a name, yet neither allowed its owner to continue influencing events. Canon repeatedly distinguishes between remembrance and survival. The ancient tombs on Moraband remain powerful because something more than history lingers there. During Yoda's journey in Star Wars, the Clone Wars, the world itself seems alive with echoes of long-dead Sith. Visions emerge naturally from the landscape. Ancient presences continue testing visitors long after flesh has disappeared. The planet behaves less like an archaeological site than a place where the past refuses to release its hold. Among the clearest canon examples of this ambition stands Darth Momin. Unlike many Sith remembered only through legend, Momin's continued existence is depicted directly. His mask preserved not merely knowledge, but personality, intention, and awareness. When Darth Vader recovered the artifact under Darth Sidious's supervision, Momin conversed, advised, manipulated, and patiently waited for opportunities unavailable to an ordinary relic. Eventually, he reconstructed a physical body through dark side ritual, demonstrating that Sith survival did not always depend upon cloning or conventional resurrection. His consciousness had simply refused to disappear. The relationship between Vader and Momin remains quietly fascinating because it reveals how dangerous these preserved minds could become. Vader sought knowledge capable of helping him reach Padme Amidala beyond death, a longing that Darth Sidious had encouraged since Revenge of the Sith. Momin recognized that desire immediately and used it with extraordinary patience. Rather than confronting Vader openly, he guided him toward rebuilding an ancient Sith superweapon on Mustafar. Every conversation appeared helpful on the surface, while serving Momin's own hidden objectives beneath. Even after centuries trapped inside a mask, a Sith Lord still pursued domination before gratitude. Mustafar itself became central to these events for reasons extending beyond Vader's personal history. Canon establishes that an ancient Sith cave beneath the volcanic world radiated immense dark side energy. Vader's fortress was deliberately constructed over that site according to plans associated with Darth Momin. The castle functioned as more than a residence or military headquarters. It became a conduit intended to focus the world's dark side currents toward a single purpose. Momin believed those energies could open a gateway reaching beyond ordinary life and death, whether motivated by grief, obsession, or hope. Vader permitted the work to continue. Imagine standing inside that fortress while lava rivers illuminate black stone walls from below. Outside, molten rock pours endlessly through volcanic channels, casting shifting orange light across obsidian towers. Deep beneath the foundations, ancient chambers remain untouched except for rituals repeated across forgotten centuries. The air carries the scent of ash and heated metal, while the Force itself seems unusually heavy, pressing against thought like invisible weight. It becomes easier to understand why Sith architects rarely chose peaceful landscapes. They sought worlds whose very geography reflected relentless conflict. Why were places like Mustafar and Moraband considered so essential to these rituals? Canon suggests that certain locations possess unusually strong connections to the Force, though the precise reasons often remain unexplained. Dagobah shelters a vergence associated with life, allowing Yoda to hide from Imperial hunters, despite his immense presence in the Force. Hutch becomes the birthplace of the Jedi Order, carrying its own profound significance. Mustafar represents the opposite current. Its wounds, violence, and ancient Sith history combined into an environment where the dark side flowed with remarkable intensity. The Sith consistently preferred building temples where the Force itself already leaned toward shadow. Not every attempt to survive death relied upon preserving consciousness inside physical objects. Darth Sidious spent decades collecting forgotten Sith teachings from across the galaxy. Canon portrays him as perhaps the greatest scholar of Sith tradition since the ancient empires. His observatories, secret archives, and expeditions into the unknown regions all reveal the same pattern. Sidious believed no single generation had discovered every answer. Instead, each Dark Lord inherited fragments left behind by predecessors, slowly assembling a larger understanding stretching across millennia. The pursuit of immortality became a collaborative project, shared unknowingly by countless Sith separated by centuries. Legends expands this theme further through figures such as Darth Andedu, who pursued techniques for extending existence beyond bodily death. While these specific accounts remain outside current canon, they illustrate ideas that later canon continues exploring through characters like Momin and Sidious. The continuity differs, yet the philosophical direction remains strikingly similar. Sith repeatedly reject the natural cycle accepted by the Jedi. They refuse to become one with the Force as Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and eventually Luke Skywalker learned to do. Instead, they attempt to remain separate from it, preserving the individual self at any cost. That distinction reaches the heart of the conflict between Jedi and Sith. After death, Jedi who master the appropriate discipline surrender their physical existence while retaining identity through harmony with the cosmic force. They appear briefly when needed, offering guidance without demanding control. Sith pursue precisely the opposite outcome. They resist surrender. They cling to identity with relentless determination. Rather than joining something greater, they seek to make eternity belong exclusively to themselves. Two different paths promise continued existence, yet each begins with fundamentally different ideas about what life is meant to become. This also explains why Sith spirits encountered in canon rarely project peace. They linger because unfinished ambition binds them. Ancient tombs become prisons as much as sanctuaries. The very success they desired often becomes another form of confinement. A consciousness trapped inside a mask cannot feel sunlight or breathe mountain air. A spirit bound to a temple cannot explore the galaxy it once sought to rule. Their victories over death prove incomplete, preserving awareness while denying freedom. The irony is difficult to ignore. The Sith feared mortality so deeply that many accepted an eternity narrower than life itself. The crimson candle has burned lower now, wax gathering around its base in slow, silent layers. Across the chamber, carved faces watching from the walls seem almost awake beneath the shifting light, as though waiting for voices that never entirely vanished. Somewhere deeper within the laboratory, immense machines continue humming beneath Exegol's frozen surface, carrying forward experiments begun by masters separated by thousands of years. The question waiting there is larger than preserving a single spirit inside a forgotten relic. What happens when an entire hidden civilization decides to complete the ancient dream that every previous Sith had failed to achieve? Why did Darth Sidious spend decades searching the oldest Sith ruins when he already ruled the greatest empire in galactic history? The question seems almost unnecessary at first. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, Sidious controlled the Imperial Senate, the Imperial Navy, the Inquisitorius, and eventually the Death Star itself. Millions obeyed his commands without hesitation. Yet power on that scale never satisfied him, because political authority and military dominance solved only temporary problems. Bodies aged, empires rebelled, apprentices could fail. The ancient Sith had spent thousands of years searching for a permanent answer, and Sidious believed their unfinished work could finally become complete through him. Canon consistently portrays Sidious as more than a master strategist. From his earliest appearances, he is shown studying hidden traditions alongside exercising political influence. His private observatories, secret collections, and interest in ancient Sith relics reveal a ruler who devoted enormous attention to forgotten knowledge. Even after the fall of the Jedi Order following Order 66, He did not abandon those pursuits. If anything, they intensified. Victory over the Republic merely removed distractions. With the galaxy beneath Imperial control, Sidious gained greater freedom to continue investigating mysteries buried since the age of the ancient Sith Empire. His fascination eventually centered upon Exegol, a world hidden deep within the unknown regions. Canon presents Exegol as both sanctuary and laboratory, protected by dangerous navigation routes requiring Sith wayfinders to reach safely. The planet is perpetually shrouded beneath storm-filled skies where lightning illuminates colossal temples rising from black stone. Unlike Coruscant, whose endless city symbolizes civilization, or Mustafar, whose volcanoes reflect violent transformation, Exegol exists almost entirely outside ordinary galactic history. It remained concealed while republics rose, empires collapsed, and entire generations lived unaware that one of the greatest concentrations of Sith knowledge still endured beyond known hyperspace lanes. Waiting there was the Sith Eternal. This secret cult devoted itself entirely to preserving Sith doctrine across generations. Canon reveals vast ceremonial gatherings inside immense amphitheaters carved beneath Exegol's surface, where thousands of hooded followers witnessed Sidious' return during the events of the Rise of Skywalker. They were not assembled overnight. Their numbers, architecture, engineering achievements, and ritual practices suggest decades of careful preparation, if not longer. While the wider galaxy believed the Sith extinct after the Battle of Endor, another civilization quietly continued serving the same ancient ambition beneath perpetual darkness. Imagine descending through one of Exegol's endless stairways. Each step disappears into mist, while distant machinery hums somewhere below the stone. Massive statues emerge briefly whenever lightning flashes through narrow openings high above before fading once more into shadow. Hooded figures pass silently between towering columns without speaking, their movements practiced through years of ritual repetition. The silence here differs from that inside abandoned tombs. This place is alive. Every corridor suggests hidden purpose rather than forgotten memory. What exactly were those hidden laboratories trying to accomplish? Canon answers part of the mystery through the cloning facilities revealed beneath Exegol. Transparent cylinders containing incomplete bodies stand beside towering mechanical equipment linked through cables and conduits stretching into darkness. One failed clone of Darth Sidious appears suspended within this machinery, its body visibly deteriorated despite extraordinary technological support. The visual evidence alone tells an important story. Sidious had not discovered effortless immortality. He had discovered a method still burdened by severe limitations requiring constant refinement. The film introduces another important concept through the creation of strand casts. Canon later expands this terminology to describe engineered beings produced through advanced genetic manipulation connected to the Emperor's long search for a suitable vessel. Supreme Leader Snoke belongs within this broader project. During Rey's exploration of Exegol, she passes immense tanks containing malformed Snoke bodies suspended in nutrient fluid. Sidious later declares that Snoke served as his puppet, revealing that the Supreme Leader had always functioned within a larger design rather than acting independently. Sith experimentation had moved beyond preserving ancient relics. It now sought to manufacture life capable of serving carefully engineered purposes. This is where Sith alchemy and advanced science appear almost impossible to separate. Canon deliberately avoids explaining every technical detail, but the imagery consistently blends ritual with biotechnology. Laboratory equipment operates beside ceremonial altars. Cloning chambers stand within temples dedicated to Sith worship. Chanting cultists surround machinery sophisticated enough to sustain failing bodies through artificial means. Rather than replacing ancient Sith traditions with modern technology, Sidious fused them together. The oldest dream of the Sith found its newest tools. Why did Sidious refuse to rely upon cloning technology alone? Because every available body failed him. The opening crawl of The Rise of Skywalker announces the Emperor's mysterious return, and later dialogue confirms that his spirit survived the destruction of the second Death Star above Endor. Yet the body supporting that consciousness appears fragile, scarred, and dependent upon immense mechanical apparatus. Canon makes an important point without lengthy exposition. Survival had been achieved, but perfection had not. The vessel remained inadequate for the power inhabiting it. This limitation explains Sidious's extraordinary interest in Rey. As the granddaughter of his cloned genetic lineage, she represented the possibility of obtaining a healthier body capable of sustaining his spirit permanently. His later plans shifted toward Ben Solo and Rey together once their Force dyad became fully apparent. The Emperor's objectives changed according to opportunity, but the underlying desire never did. Every decision traced back to the same ancient Sith obsession introduced thousands of years earlier. A Dark Lord should never accept death while another path remained available. There is a remarkable continuity stretching from the first temples on Korriban to the laboratories beneath Exegol. Ancient Sith experimented with beasts, relics, and rituals. Darth Momin preserved consciousness inside a mask. Vader pursued forbidden gateways beneath Mustafar. Sidious united cloning, Sith lore, genetic engineering, and the devotion of the Sith Eternal into one vast undertaking. Different centuries produced different techniques, yet every generation inherited the same central question, without ever abandoning it. How can power escape the limits imposed by flesh? The crimson candle still burns inside the forgotten laboratory where our journey began, though now its light seems to mingle with another glow deeper underground. Beyond the old stone work tables stand towering glass cylinders humming softly with artificial life, linking ancient ritual chambers to the hidden cloning complexes of Exegol. Thousands of years separate these rooms, yet they feel strangely connected, as though one laboratory simply continued where the other had paused. And beyond those endless rows of machines waits an even larger mystery. How did an entire hidden world sustain these impossible experiments without the rest of the galaxy ever realizing what was growing beneath its storms? Why did Exegol remain hidden for so long when it housed one of the largest military and religious projects in Sith history? At first glance, the scale seems impossible to conceal. Canon reveals thousands of Sith eternal cultists, immense temple complexes, underground cloning facilities, and the Final Order fleet waiting beneath the planet's storm-covered skies. Entire star destroyers equipped with planet-killing axial superlasers stood prepared for deployment. such an undertaking required labor, resources, organization, and generations of unwavering loyalty. Yet for decades, even the New Republic remained unaware that this hidden civilization continued growing beyond the edge of known space. The answer begins with geography. Exegol lies within the unknown regions, a vast expanse where hyperspace travel becomes extraordinarily dangerous due to gravitational anomalies, shifting stellar phenomena, and poorly charted routes. Canon introduces Sith wayfinders as the essential navigational devices, allowing travelers to reach the planet safely. Darth Vader recovered one beneath his fortress on Mustafar, while another remained hidden inside the Death Star ruins on Kefbir until Rey claimed it. Without a wayfinder, reaching Exegol was not merely difficult, it was nearly impossible. The Sith did not rely solely upon secrecy. They relied upon a galaxy whose maps simply ended before their sanctuary began. This isolation transformed Exegol into something unique among Sith worlds. Korriban could be visited. Mustafar appeared on star charts. Even Malachor, though ancient and abandoned, existed within known space. Exegol stood apart because access itself became a test. Only those already trusted by the Sith possessed the knowledge necessary to arrive alive. That detail echoes the oldest traditions established thousands of years earlier. Ancient temples concealed holocrons behind elaborate trials. Exegol concealed an entire civilization behind the galaxy's most dangerous frontier. Once you arrive, the landscape immediately explains why the Sith considered it sacred. Lightning tears across black clouds, almost continuously, illuminating colossal statues and impossible towers for only a heartbeat before darkness returns. Jagged mountains rise from barren plains, untouched by forests, rivers, or ordinary settlements. Every visible structure appears carved from the same black stone, creating the impression that architecture has grown directly from the planet itself. Canon repeatedly frames Exegol as a place where nature and construction no longer compete. The entire world seems devoted to a single purpose. Imagine walking through one of its vast ceremonial halls. Thousands of hooded figures stand silently in descending tiers surrounding a central platform where chants echo upward into darkness. Above them, enormous pillars disappear into shadows so deep that their upper ends cannot be seen. The air feels cold, despite the machinery operating beneath the floor. Every footstep produces echoes swallowed almost immediately by the immense chamber. There are no colorful banners, no royal decorations, no celebrations of ordinary life. Everything directs attention toward power, ritual, and obedience. The Sith Eternal itself deserves careful attention because it represents far more than anonymous followers gathered around Darth Sidious. Canon portrays this organization as preserving Sith knowledge, maintaining sacred sites, and supporting projects extending across generations. Members devoted entire lives to goals they would never personally complete. Some operated laboratories, others built warships, others performed ceremonies, preserving traditions older than the Republic itself. Unlike the Rule of Two established by Darth Bane, which limited active Sith Lords to master and apprentice, the Sith Eternal functioned as an enormous supporting order dedicated to ensuring Sith survival, regardless of which Dark Lord occupied the throne. This distinction resolves an apparent contradiction. The Rule of Two governed the succession of true Sith Lords, not every servant of the Sith. Darth Sidious remained the reigning Dark Lord, while countless cultists, engineers, navigators, and attendants carried out responsibilities beneath him. Exegol therefore became the hidden foundation supporting the visible empire. Imperial governors believed Coruscant represented the center of power. Grand Moffs looked toward the Imperial Palace. Yet beneath the surface, Sidious invested extraordinary resources into another capital that almost no one inside the Empire even knew existed. Nowhere is that hidden effort more visible than the Final Order fleet. During the climax of the Rise of Skywalker, enormous Ziston-class star destroyers rise from Exegol's surface, carrying axial superlasers capable of destroying planets. Their scale immediately raises practical questions. How were so many vessels constructed without attracting attention? Canon deliberately leaves many logistical details unexplained, but the visual evidence points toward decades of continuous production beneath the planet's storms. Massive shipyards, underground industrial complexes, and generations of workers must have contributed to an undertaking spanning far longer than the brief final years of the Galactic Civil War. The cloning facilities, hidden below those shipyards, reinforce the same impression. Rows of enormous containment cylinders stretch into darkness while technicians and cultists move quietly between towering machines. The laboratories appear neither temporary nor experimental. They resemble institutions refined through repeated cycles of failure and improvement. Every cable, platform, and support structure suggest patient engineering rather than desperate improvisation. Sidious had not stumbled upon forbidden science shortly before his apparent return. He'd spent years, perhaps decades, building an infrastructure capable of pursuing it relentlessly. Why would so many individuals dedicate their entire lives to a ruler they rarely, if ever, saw? The Sith Eternal offers one possible answer. Unlike ordinary Imperial officers seeking promotion or political influence, these followers viewed themselves as participants in a sacred mission extending beyond personal ambition. Sith doctrine promised that individual sacrifice contributed to the survival of the Sith Order itself. Every completed corridor, every functioning reactor, every preserved manuscript, and every cloned body represented another step toward restoring the ancient vision first imagined on Korriban, thousands of years before. Service became a form of worship. Even the architecture reflects remarkable continuity with the earliest Sith Empire. Monumental stairways, towering statues, pyramidal forms, and ritual chambers dominate Exegol, just as they once defined Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords. Different eras introduced different technologies, yet the symbolic language remained unchanged. Every generation of Sith consciously placed itself within an unbroken historical tradition. Sidious did not present himself as a revolutionary, abandoning ancient customs. He presented himself as their rightful culmination, the Dark Lord finally capable of completing what earlier Sith had only begun. The crimson candle's light now seems almost insignificant beside the immense energy flowing through Exegol's hidden complexes. Somewhere beyond the laboratory walls, countless machines continue humming beneath stone carved by forgotten architects, while storm clouds conceal an entire fleet waiting patiently in darkness. Yet silence still hangs over everything, because not every experiment conducted here achieved the perfection its creators desired. Behind sealed blast doors and abandoned chambers lie the evidence of failures the Sith never intended anyone to witness. Why do the ruins of Sith laboratories feel more unsettling than triumphant? The answer lies in something the Sith themselves rarely celebrated. Their greatest failures remained behind sealed doors, abandoned beneath collapsing temples, or hidden deep within planets that no longer appeared on ordinary navigation charts. Canon often shows the results of successful Sith plans because those reshape galactic history. Yet scattered across Moraband, Mustafar, Exegol, and countless unnamed sites are quieter reminders that many experiments ended not with victory but with silence. Every abandoned chamber suggests another lesson the Sith never intended future generations to witness. The body-sustaining Darth Sidious on Exegol is itself one of the clearest examples. When Rey first encounters him during the Rise of Skywalker, the Emperor appears suspended from an immense mechanical armature surrounded by conduits carrying life support systems into his failing form. His fingers have withered. His skin bears the marks of extraordinary decay. Movement requires machinery supporting what cloning alone could not preserve. Canon presents this image without lengthy explanation because it speaks for itself. Sidious had achieved survival, but survival had demanded compromises that no Sith would have willingly accepted as a final triumph. This distinction matters because it separates success from perfection. The Emperor's consciousness endured after the destruction of the second Death Star above Endor, yet his vessel deteriorated almost immediately beneath the strain of containing such immense dark side power. That limitation explains nearly every decision he makes throughout the sequel era. He requires a stronger body, he requires a suitable heir, he requires another solution because the existing one cannot last. Even the greatest Sith scholar in known canon remained trapped inside an imperfect answer. The failed Snoke bodies resting inside transparent cylinders reinforce exactly the same lesson. Rey walks through chambers where multiple incomplete forms float silently in nutrient tanks before she finally confronts Sidious himself. Later dialogue confirms that Snoke had been engineered to serve as the Emperor's puppet rather than acting independently. Those abandoned bodies reveal repeated attempts rather than immediate success. Each preserved form represents time, knowledge, and resources invested into solving a problem that resisted easy solutions. Sith alchemy and cloning could create remarkable vessels, yet many proved unsuitable before one even approached the intended purpose. Imagine wandering alone through one of those deserted cloning halls after every technician has disappeared. Towering cylinders stand motionless in long rows, while condensation slowly gathers upon thick glass. Soft, mechanical vibrations echo through empty corridors where no voices remain. Some chambers contain only cloudy liquid. Others preserve shapes impossible to identify clearly through the dim light. Every few moments, another quiet pulse travels through hidden machinery beneath the floor, reminding you that even abandoned experiments continue operating long after their creators are gone. Why did failure never discourage the Sith from continuing these dangerous pursuits? Because failure itself became another source of knowledge. Throughout Star Wars canon, the Sith consistently interpret setbacks differently than the Jedi. A Jedi Master often pauses after defeat to reconsider motives, seeking wisdom before repeating the same path. Sith philosophy instead demands greater determination. If an apprentice fails, the apprentice was weak. If an experiment collapses, another attempt follows using stronger methods. The objective rarely changes. Only the ruthlessness applied to achieving it increases. That philosophy can be observed throughout Darth Sidious's own career. His first apprentice, Darth Maul, was believed dead after Naboo. Count Dooku replaced him. Dooku eventually became expendable once Anakin Skywalker appeared capable of greater potential. Vader survived catastrophic injuries on Mustafar, yet never fulfilled every expectation placed upon him. Sidious continually searched for stronger successors, without abandoning his larger ambitions. Failure never convinced him to surrender the pursuit of absolute power. It merely redirected his attention toward another candidate. Ancient Sith. History reflects the same pattern. While modern canon leaves many details deliberately mysterious, every surviving temple hints that generations of Dark Lords built directly upon the unfinished work of those preceding them. New chambers extended older complexes. Fresh carvings surrounded weathered inscriptions. Holocrons accumulated beside relics already ancient. The architecture itself resembles a conversation carried across centuries, with each ruler inheriting both discoveries and mistakes from forgotten predecessors. No Sith laboratory appears designed for only one lifetime. Each anticipated future occupants continuing the work. Legends expands this image through numerous accounts of Sith experiments producing unstable creatures, corrupted landscapes, or catastrophic magical consequences. Those stories remain outside current canon unless specifically restored, yet they fit comfortably beside canon's repeated portrayal of dark side ambition carrying unintended costs. Whether through Momin's dangerous resurrection, Sidious's decaying clone body, or Exegol's endless search for viable vessels, the same theme persists. Dark side mastery always extracts a price from those attempting to command it. The precise form changes, the principle does not. There is another irony hidden beneath all these failures. The Sith believe themselves masters of control, yet nearly every major disaster associated with their history grows from something escaping that control. Darth Vader ultimately turns against Sidious out of compassion for Luke Skywalker. Kylo Ren rejects Snoke before confronting the Emperor himself. Momin manipulates Vader instead of remaining an obedient servant. Even the final order depends upon followers whose absolute loyalty cannot prevent its eventual destruction. The Sith repeatedly build systems intended to eliminate uncertainty, only to discover that life refuses complete obedience. The Jedi understood this truth differently. They accepted uncertainty as part of the Force itself. Seasons changed on worlds like Lothal. Republics rose and eventually faded. Individual lives reached natural conclusions before becoming one with the cosmic force. Sith alchemy fought against that rhythm with relentless determination. Every failed laboratory, abandoned ritual chamber, and incomplete clone quietly reminds us that resisting the current of the Force demanded extraordinary effort while never guaranteeing lasting success. The more completely the Sith attempted to dominate existence, the more fragile many of their victories became. The crimson candle has almost burned halfway down now, its flame reflecting faintly across cracked glass cylinders left standing in forgotten corners of the laboratory. Some are empty. Others contain only dried residue from experiments whose names vanished with their creators. Nothing stirs except the distant vibration of machines still operating somewhere beneath Exegol's endless stone. Beyond the next chamber waits a different mystery altogether, one that haunted the Jedi for thousands of years. If even failed Sith creations could survive across centuries, why did the Jedi fear their knowledge far more than their armies?
Why did the Jedi fear Sith knowledge more than Sith armies? At first, the question seems almost counterintuitive. Armies conquer planets. Superweapons destroy worlds. Fleets decide the outcome of wars. Yet throughout Star Wars canon, the Jedi repeatedly devote extraordinary effort to recovering holocrons, sealing temples, guarding vergences, and preventing forbidden teachings from spreading. Military victories could end a campaign. Dangerous ideas could survive forever. The Jedi eventually learned that defeating a Sith Lord was often easier than ensuring no one would follow the same path again. The Jedi archives on Coruscant stood at the center of this effort for thousands of years. Before the Clone Wars, the temple contained one of the greatest collections of historical records in the galaxy, including carefully restricted material concerning the Sith. Access to many subjects depended upon rank and responsibility rather than simple curiosity. Younglings studied the living force, diplomacy, languages, and history, but knowledge capable of encouraging fascination with the dark side remained carefully controlled. This restraint was not born from arrogance alone. It reflected generations of painful experience demonstrating that information itself could become a temptation. The events surrounding Ezra Bridger in Star Wars Rebels illustrate this danger with remarkable clarity. Ezra encounters a Sith holocron on Malachor after the ancient superweapon beneath the planet is activated and the temple begins collapsing. Unlike an ordinary archive, the holocron does not simply answer questions. It responds to desire. Ezra seeks knowledge to defeat the Empire and protect his friends. Perfectly understandable goals for a young Jedi. Yet the device steadily encourages a different way of thinking, offering quicker answers, greater certainty, and fewer moral restraints. The object itself becomes an active participant in shaping the student's decisions. This pattern continues through Ezra's uneasy connection with Darth Maul. Although Maul is no longer the Sith apprentice he once was under Darth Sidious, his understanding of the dark side remains profound. He recognizes immediately how powerful forbidden knowledge can become when combined with youthful determination. Maul rarely persuades through brute force alone. Instead, he offers information, half-truths, and promises of greater understanding. The relationship quietly demonstrates one of the oldest Sith principles. The fastest road toward corruption often begins with sincere curiosity rather than obvious malice. Imagine standing inside the vast Jedi archives late at night while Coruscant's endless traffic glows beyond towering windows. Rows upon rows of illuminated data shelves extend farther than the eye comfortably follows. Ancient holobooks rest beside crystalline memory vaults containing centuries of accumulated scholarship. Somewhere within these peaceful halls are sealed records that only a handful of masters may examine. The silence feels protective rather than oppressive. Yet even here beneath the heart of the Jedi Temple,
hidden knowledge remains something to approach with extraordinary caution. Why not simply destroy every Sith artifact the Order recovered? Canon repeatedly suggests that doing so was not always possible. Powerful dark side relics often resisted ordinary destruction or remained spiritually dangerous even after physical damage. Temples continued radiating dark side energy long after abandonment. The cave beneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant itself concealed an ancient Sith shrine buried beneath successive generations of construction, a revelation explored in canon reference works and stories surrounding the High Republic and later eras. The Jedi did not erase that place completely. Instead, they built directly above it, hoping the light side presence of the temple would contain what remained beneath. That extraordinary decision reveals an uncomfortable truth. Even at the height of their influence, the Jedi could not simply remove every trace of the Sith from history. The dark side had already become woven into certain places too deeply for straightforward solutions. Worlds like Moraband retained their oppressive atmosphere regardless of political change. Mustafar remained saturated with violent energy despite shifting rulers. Exegol survived beyond known space entirely. The galaxy itself carried memories that no archive could fully rewrite. Luke Skywalker eventually inherited this complicated legacy after the fall of the Empire. Canon establishes that Luke devoted years to searching ancient Jedi and Sith sites while attempting to rebuild the Jedi Order. His travels led him toward Achto, ancient temples, forgotten texts, and relics preserved across the galaxy. Unlike the prequel-era Jedi, Luke operated without the support of a vast institution or centralized archive. He often had to investigate locations personally, piecing together traditions scattered by Palpatine's purge. Every discovery carried opportunity alongside danger because the same ruins preserving Jedi wisdom frequently stood close to remnants of the Sith. This pursuit explains why Luke eventually possessed knowledge concerning Exegol itself, even though he never reached the hidden world during his lifetime. The Wayfinder recovered by Rey originates from investigations Luke had already begun. His journals, maps, and research demonstrate that understanding the Sith remained necessary even after the Empire's defeat. Peace could not be preserved through ignorance. The challenge lay in studying darkness without allowing darkness to become attractive. Few tasks demanded greater discipline. Why does forbidden knowledge continue resurfacing despite repeated attempts to bury it? The answer reaches beyond the Sith themselves. Curiosity belongs to every generation. Ancient temples attract explorers. Strange relics invite examination. Historians open sealed vaults hoping to answer forgotten questions. Force-sensitive individuals naturally sense places where the Force feels unusually strong. None of these impulses begin as evil, yet the Sith designed many of their creations specifically to exploit that innocent desire to understand what others had hidden. There is also a quieter reason the Jedi never entirely abandoned studying the Sith. Understanding an enemy often prevents repeating past mistakes. Yoda's experiences during the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi's investigations into Kamino, and Luke's later search for ancient teachings all reveal a common principle. The Jedi did not fear knowledge itself. They feared knowledge divorced from wisdom. Sith alchemy promised extraordinary capability while encouraging the belief that compassion, restraint, and humility merely slowed progress.
That philosophy, rather than any single ritual, represented the greatest threat. The crimson candle flickers gently now, as though responding to distant currents moving through the forgotten laboratory. Beyond its small circle of light rest shelves, once filled with holocrons, scrolls, and ceremonial tablets whose words shaped countless ambitious minds before vanishing into history. Some were recovered by the Jedi, others found new owners. Many almost certainly remain hidden, still beneath stone untouched for millennia. And that lingering possibility leads quietly toward the final mystery. Did Sith alchemy truly end with the fall of Exegol? Or has its oldest lesson already begun, waiting for another seeker to arrive? Why does the story of Sith alchemy refuse to end even after the destruction of Exegol? Canon gives us a dramatic conclusion to the Sith Eternal's final campaign during the Battle of Exegol, where Rey, aided through the Force by the voices of past Jedi, confronts Darth Sidious while the Resistance attacks the Final Order fleet above the storm-covered world. The Emperor's physical body is destroyed. His fleet falls. The immense temple that had sheltered generations of Sith collapses around him. It feels like an ending worthy of thousands of years of accumulated darkness. Yet Star Wars has always treated knowledge differently from armies, and that difference leaves one final mystery quietly waiting in the shadows. The destruction of the Sith Eternal did not erase the galaxy's history. Moraband still exists beneath its crimson skies. Mustafar still circles its violent sun, its rivers of lava continuing to carve new channels through ancient stone. The cave beneath Vader's fortress does not disappear because its former master is gone. Countless Sith tombs remain scattered across forgotten sectors, many never explored in canon by the New Republic or the later Jedi. A civilization can fall in a single battle. The places that shaped it often endure for ages afterward. Canon repeatedly reminds us that artifacts survive their owners. Darth Maul's lightsaber remained after Naboo. Darth Vader's helmet became an object of obsession for Kylo Ren. Ancient Jedi texts survived on Ahch-To until Rey recovered them, despite Luke Skywalker believing they had been destroyed in the Burning Tree Library. Sith holocrons, ceremonial relics, and temples follow the same pattern. Their creators perish. Their influence lingers. That continuity is one of the oldest truths in the Star Wars galaxy, crossing every era from the High Republic to the sequel trilogy. Imagine a forgotten moon orbiting a star that no major hyperspace route has visited for centuries. Wind slowly moves across abandoned stone stairways, leading toward a temple entrance nearly hidden beneath drifting sand. No banners remain. No guards stand watch. The silence feels complete until a traveler notices faint carvings emerging beneath accumulated dust. A single doorway still opens. Deep below, untouched chambers wait exactly as they were left by hands long turned to ash. The Force has no need for clocks. It remembers patiently. Could another seeker eventually find such a place? Canon leaves that possibility entirely open. The galaxy is unimaginably vast, containing millions of inhabited systems and countless unexplored worlds beyond the familiar core, mid-rim, and outer rim. Even during the height of the Republic, the unknown regions remained only partially mapped. After the sequel trilogy, no canon source claims that every Sith site has finally been discovered. Such certainty would contradict the very scale of the setting itself. There is always another forgotten moon,
Another abandoned shrine, another sealed chamber hidden beneath collapsing stone. This is where careful speculation naturally enters the conversation. A popular observation among Star Wars readers is that Sith history behaves in cycles rather than straight lines. New generations repeatedly rediscover fragments left by earlier ones, believing themselves pioneers, while unknowingly following ancient footsteps. That pattern appears throughout canon without requiring any specific future villain. Sidious studied forgotten Sith teachings. Vader inherited Momin's knowledge. Ezra encountered a Sith holocron created centuries before his birth. The names change. The mechanism remains familiar. The Jedi understood this recurring pattern perhaps better than anyone. That understanding shaped their emphasis on discipline over raw ability. A lightsaber could be built in a matter of days. Once knowledge and materials became available, character required years of patient instruction. Yoda spent centuries teaching successive generations because wisdom could not simply be copied into another mind like information stored inside a holocron. Sith alchemy promised shortcuts around natural limits. Jedi tradition insisted that no shortcut could replace inner balance. Their disagreement was never merely philosophical. It concerned the future of civilization itself. There is another reason these ancient laboratories continue capturing the imagination. They reveal that the Sith were not satisfied with ruling the galaxy. Political domination alone never fulfilled their deepest ambition. Every experiment with cloned bodies, preserved spirits, corrupted relics, and altered creatures pointed towards something larger. They wished to reshape reality until death, chance, and limitation no longer applied to them personally. The tragedy is that every apparent success created another dependency. Sidious required machinery. Momin required his mask. The Sith Eternal required absolute secrecy. Their victories never became as effortless as they imagined. Meanwhile, the Jedi path consistently moves in the opposite direction. Qui-Gon Jinn discovers how consciousness may survive through harmony with the Force rather than resistance against it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and eventually other Jedi continue that tradition across different eras of canon. They do not preserve themselves through laboratories or cloned vessels. They release control instead of tightening their grip upon it. The contrast could hardly be sharper. Both traditions seek endurance beyond physical death, yet they arrive through completely different understandings of what it means to live. So perhaps the greatest forbidden secret of Sith alchemy was never hidden inside a ritual, a laboratory, or a forgotten holocron. Perhaps it was the realization that unlimited control always remained just beyond reach. Every generation of Sith inherited extraordinary discoveries from those before it. Every generation also inherited unfinished work, failed experiments, and ambitions that still demanded another lifetime. The promise of final mastery remained forever close enough to pursue and forever distant enough to escape complete possession. The crimson candle that welcomed you at the beginning of this journey has almost reached the end of its wick. Its final light glimmers across silent stone tables, empty cloning vessels, forgotten tools, and ancient carvings that have watched centuries pass without moving. The laboratory is quiet once more, not because every mystery has been answered, but because the room no longer needs to speak. It has learned the lesson that every Sith eventually learned for themselves. Time waits longer than any empire, any Dark Lord, or any forbidden experiment ever can. Why does every age of the galaxy seem destined to rediscover the same forbidden doors? The Sith are gone, the final order has fallen, and Darth Sidious's last design collapsed beneath the storms of Exegol. Yet the galaxy left behind, at the end of the Rise of Skywalker, is no smaller than the one that existed before the Clone Wars. Billions of worlds continue orbiting their stars. Ancient hyperspace routes still cross forgotten sectors. Entire civilizations remain undocumented by the surviving governments of the core. The greatest mystery is no longer whether the Sith were defeated. It is whether every trace of their knowledge could ever truly be found. Canon offers no evidence that such a complete recovery has taken place. Rey departs Exegol after the Emperor's defeat, but she does not begin a systematic exploration of every Sith sanctuary scattered across the galaxy. The New Republic had already been devastated by the destruction of the Hosnian system. The Resistance won a decisive victory, yet rebuilding governments, trade routes, and ordinary life would naturally take precedence over archaeological expeditions into forgotten Sith space. History has a habit of leaving dangerous places untouched simply because more immediate problems demand attention. The ruins remain where they always stood, waiting with remarkable patience. Consider Moraband once again. The Valley of the Dark Lords still contains the monumental tombs of ancient Sith rulers, their pyramids rising above the desert, exactly as they did thousands of years earlier. During Yoda's vision quest in the Clone Wars, the world demonstrated that even abandoned sites retain extraordinary dark side presence. The ancient temple did not require living priests to remain dangerous. The Force itself preserved echoes of those who had ruled there. Nothing in later canon suggests that Moraband somehow became ordinary after Sidious fell. A world shaped by millennia of darkness does not forget overnight. Mustafar follows the same pattern. After Darth Vader's death aboard the second Death Star, his fortress remained standing above the lava rivers. The dark side cave beneath it did not vanish, simply because its master had been redeemed in his final moments. Canon consistently separates a person's moral transformation from the spiritual nature of certain places. Vader returned to the light through compassion for Luke Skywalker. Mustafar remained Mustafar. Volcanic fire continued flowing beneath black cliffs where ancient Sith rituals had been performed long before Anakin Skywalker was born. Imagine arriving centuries from now at one of these forgotten strongholds. Vegetation has begun reclaiming fractured stairways. Stone reliefs have softened beneath wind and rain. Roofs have collapsed into once sacred chambers, allowing starlight to reach floors that had remained hidden for thousands of years. Nature patiently continues its quiet work. Yet beneath layers of earth, sealed vaults remain perfectly intact, protected not by active guardians, but simply by the immense passage of time. Some discoveries require brilliance, others require nothing more than a misplaced excavation or an explorer who wanders one corridor too far. Why did the Sith place such confidence in hidden knowledge instead of public teaching? The rule of two, established by Darth Bane in canon, provides part of the answer. Bane reshaped the Sith after concluding that large numbers of competing Dark Lords weakened the Order through endless rivalry. One master and one apprentice would preserve the strongest traditions while preventing internal collapse. That philosophy naturally encouraged secrecy. If power belonged to only two living Sith at any given time, then preserving hidden repositories of ancient learning became essential. Temples, holocrons, and concealed sanctuaries functioned as silent teachers waiting for each new generation. The irony is that the Jedi developed their own methods of preservation while reaching almost opposite conclusions. The sacred Jedi texts kept on Ahch-To survived not because they tempted readers with domination, but because they preserved centuries of accumulated wisdom. Luke Skywalker initially believed the books should disappear alongside the failed Jedi Order he blamed for Ben Solo's fall. Yet Yoda gently reminded him that knowledge remains valuable even when those preserving it have made mistakes. Rey secretly carried the texts aboard the Millennium Falcon, ensuring they survived into the next generation. Both Jedi and Sith trusted books, relics, and ancient sites. They simply hoped future students would learn entirely different lessons from them. That contrast reveals one of the most elegant patterns in Star Wars storytelling. The Sith attempt to preserve individuals. The Jedi attempt to preserve understanding. Sidious wanted his own consciousness to endure forever through cloned vessels. The Jedi accepted that individual masters would pass into the Force while their teachings continued through new students. One tradition centered eternity upon the self. The other centered continuity upon the community. Those opposing philosophies echo through every era, from the ancient Sith Empire to Rey standing alone on the sands of Tatooine. There's room here for one final piece of carefully marked speculation. Many readers have wondered whether undiscovered Sith, holocrons, hidden observatories, or forgotten laboratories still exist somewhere within the unknown regions beyond the territories explored in canon. At present, no canonical story confirms such discoveries after the Battle of Exegol, yet neither does canon declare every hidden sanctuary destroyed. Given the enormous scale of the galaxy and the Sith's long history of building secret repositories, the possibility remains entirely open. It is precisely the sort of unanswered question that Star Wars has often allowed future storytellers to explore. Perhaps that uncertainty explains why Sith Alchemy continues fascinating scholars, readers, and viewers alike. It is not merely a collection of bizarre rituals or frightening experiments. It represents a conversation stretching across thousands of years between ambitious minds that refuse to accept natural limits. Every generation added another fragment before disappearing. Every surviving relic became another sentence in that unfinished dialogue. The laboratories beneath Exegol were never isolated curiosities. They were simply the latest chapter in a history that began beneath the crimson skies of ancient Korriban. The crimson candle has become little more than a glowing ember now, barely bright enough to illuminate the edges of the old laboratory. Shadows reclaim the shelves where holocrons once rested. The work tables where impossible experiments unfolded, and the stone floor worn smooth by generations of careful footsteps. Outside, nothing disturbs the silence except the distant whisper of wind moving through abandoned corridors that no living Sith will walk again. Whether the final secret has truly vanished or merely slipped back into darkness remains unanswered, resting as quietly as the ancient chamber itself. While the last trace of crimson light slowly fades, Why does a single forgotten candle still matter after thousands of years of Sith history have passed?
Because throughout this journey, that small flame has represented something the Sith themselves never fully understood. They believed power endured through domination, preserved bodies, hidden laboratories, and artifacts infused with the dark side. Yet every empire they raised eventually fell into silence. Every throne became empty. Every master left behind chambers that future generations entered as curious strangers rather than loyal disciples. The candle remained, quietly illuminating the difference between what survives physically and what survives meaningfully. The Battle of Exegol marked the final known defeat of the Sith in current canon. Above the storm-covered planet, resistance pilots led by Poe Dameron confronted the Final Order fleet, while ordinary citizens from across the galaxy answered Lando Calrissian's call for aid. Below the surface, Rey faced Darth Sidious inside the ancient Sith citadel, refusing his demand that she strike him down in hatred. Guided by the voices of Jedi who had become one with the Force, including Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Luminara Unduli, Adi Gallia, Aayla Secura, Mace Windu, and Yoda, she stood against the accumulated ambition of countless Sith generations. Sidious unleashed his full power through Force lightning, only to have it turned back upon him. The throne room that represented the culmination of millennia of Sith planning became the place where that lineage reached its known end. That ending carries extraordinary symbolism when viewed beside the earliest chapters of Sith history. Thousands of years earlier, the exiled Dark Jedi had arrived among the Sith species, believing strength entitled them to reshape an entire civilization. From those beginnings came Korriban's tombs, Ziost's temples, Darth Bane's rule of two, Darth Momin's forbidden experiments, Darth Sidious' hidden empire, and the laboratories beneath Exegol. Every era expanded upon the previous one without abandoning the central belief that enough knowledge could overcome every natural boundary. Sith alchemy became one expression of that conviction. It was never the whole philosophy, but it revealed the philosophy with unusual clarity. Imagine returning one final time to the abandoned laboratory where this story began. The crimson candle has almost disappeared into a shallow pool of cooled wax. Stone tables remain exactly where ancient alchemists left them. Empty glass vessels catch the final traces of light before surrendering once more to darkness. Dust continues settling upon forgotten instruments that no living hand has touched in generations. The silence no longer feels threatening. It feels ancient, patient, and complete. What then should we make of Sith alchemy itself? Canon suggests that it was never a single spell, a single ritual, or one secret technique hidden inside a forgotten holocron. Instead, it was a way of approaching existence. It combined cloning, preservation of consciousness, corruption of objects, manipulation of living beings, sacred architecture, and the dark side into one continuous pursuit. Different Sith emphasized different methods according to the knowledge available in their era. Darth Momin pursued artistic creation fused with forbidden ritual. Darth Sidious united ancient lore with advanced biotechnology. The outward forms evolved, but the underlying desire remained astonishingly consistent. The contrast with the Jedi, becomes even more striking when the entire history is viewed from beginning to end. Jedi Masters accepted that wisdom passed most faithfully from teacher to student through patience, compassion, and discipline. Their greatest achievement after death was not preserving a body, but becoming one with the Force while continuing to guide others when truly needed. Qui-Gon Jinn discovered the path. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda preserved it. Luke Skywalker later appeared to Rey in the same tradition. The Sith invested extraordinary effort into remaining themselves forever. The Jedi discovered peace by becoming part of something larger than themselves. There is a quiet lesson hidden inside the architecture of these opposing traditions. Sith monuments are often monumental, enclosed, and defensive. Their greatest sanctuaries lie beneath deserts, volcanoes, or perpetual storms. Jedi temples welcome light, open space, and connection with the living world around them. Neither style exists by accident. Buildings reflect beliefs just as surely as rituals do. Walking through the ruins of either order tells you something about the people who first placed those stones. One final mystery remains, and canon wisely leaves it unanswered. Somewhere beyond the familiar core worlds, beyond the mid-rim and the outer rim, beyond even the dangerous hyperspace routes threading through the unknown regions, countless worlds remain unexplored. Some almost certainly contain forgotten civilizations entirely unrelated to the Sith. Others may hide abandoned observatories, collapsed shrines, or sealed repositories whose builders disappeared before the Republic itself existed. Current canon neither confirms nor denies such discoveries. That uncertainty preserves one of Star Wars' greatest strengths, the sense that the galaxy always remains larger than any map. It is tempting to imagine another ambitious explorer eventually uncovering one forgotten holocron beneath drifting sand or inside the collapsed vault of an ancient temple. That possibility belongs to speculation rather than established canon, and it should remain there. The story does not require another Sith to make these ruins meaningful. Their importance already lies in what they reveal about the civilization that created them. Every cracked laboratory wall, every weathered carving, and every abandoned cloning chamber reminds us that immense power can coexist with profound imperfection. You have walked quietly through crimson deserts on Moraband, frozen plains on Zeost, volcanic cliffs on Mustafar, and the endless storms of Exegol. You have stood beside Darth Maul's mask, watched the failing body of Darth Sidious sustained by impossible machinery, looked upon silent rows of cloned vessels, and followed a history stretching across thousands of years. Along the way, the forbidden secrets of Sith alchemy became less mysterious in one sense and more mysterious in another. We learned how the Sith pursued these arts, yet the Force itself still refuses to reveal every unanswered question. Some chambers remain sealed. Some names have vanished forever. Some stories are content to sleep beneath stone. The crimson candle finally gives one last gentle flicker before the flame quietly disappears. Darkness settles across the ancient laboratory, exactly as it has done countless nights before, wrapping forgotten tools, silent tables, and empty halls in perfect stillness. Outside, unseen winds move softly across worlds that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires without ever hurrying their passage. Somewhere, Buried beneath desert sand or volcanic rock, another forgotten chamber waits in silence. But here, at last, nothing more needs to be awakened. Only the quiet remains. When you step back from the laboratories, the temples, the cloning chambers, and the forgotten tombs, a quiet pattern begins to emerge. Sith alchemy was never simply the art of changing flesh or preserving consciousness. It was the outward expression of a deeper conviction that every limit could be conquered if enough knowledge, enough will, and enough time were gathered into a single pair of hands. The Sith looked upon the Force and saw something to command. The Jedi looked upon the same Force and saw something to understand. That difference seems small when spoken aloud, yet across thousands of years, it shaped every triumph, every tragedy, and every choice that echoed through the galaxy. You can see that truth repeated from the earliest tombs on Moraband to the throne room beneath Exegol. The Sith grew stronger with every generation, collecting relics, refining rituals, mastering technology that earlier ages could scarcely imagine. Their achievements were genuine. They bent life, preserved minds, engineered bodies, and concealed entire civilizations beyond the reach of the Republic itself. Yet every victory carried another burden that demanded still more control. A stronger body required another experiment. A hidden empire required deeper secrecy. A preserved spirit required another prison. Their search for freedom slowly became a chain they forged around themselves, link by careful link, until they no longer recognized its weight. The Jedi were never free from failure. The fall of the Republic, the destruction of the Jedi Order, the exile of Luke Skywalker, and the suffering endured by countless worlds remind us that wisdom does not prevent sorrow. But Star Wars has always suggested that failure is not the opposite of hope. It is often the place where hope quietly begins again. Qui-Gon Jinn accepted that he would not see every consequence of his choices. Obi-Wan Kenobi trusted another generation to continue the work. Anakin Skywalker found redemption not by escaping death, but by choosing compassion in the final moments still given to him. Rey inherited neither a perfect galaxy nor a complete understanding of the Force, only the opportunity to choose a different path than the one offered to her. Perhaps that is why the ancient Sith laboratories feel strangely peaceful once their voices have faded. They no longer tempt because of the terrible things accomplished within them. They remind you that even the greatest ambition cannot preserve itself forever. Stone wears smooth beneath countless footsteps. Metal rusts. Machines eventually fall silent. Even the most carefully hidden secret waits patiently for someone willing either to repeat an old mistake or finally learn from it. The Force continues flowing through all of it, unchanged by the rise or fall of those who believed they could possess it. Now the journey comes full circle. You find yourself once again inside that quiet chamber where a single crimson candle burned beside abandoned instruments and empty work tables. The flame is gone, leaving only the faint scent of cooling wax and the memory of gentle light resting across ancient stone. Outside, the galaxy continues, turning through endless nights and distant dawns, carrying new travelers towards stories that have not yet been written. Inside the forgotten laboratory, nothing stirs anymore, and that deep, patient silence is finally enough.